approach of courting really big YouTubers with huge audiences and getting the Z06 in front of their eyes is pretty interesting. What's up YouTube? Fred here. Last week, since I did a video about paint to sample for the Corvette program, I didn't get a chance to talk about some of the news that had happened. It had been a pretty quiet week. So this week, with more things going on, we're getting right into it. So first I want to mention some footage of a Torch Red Z06 that was spotted in a parking lot right during a pretty heavy snowstorm. The person filming did a walk around of the car, and overall, there's nothing really remarkable. It's got black wheels, it doesn't have the Z07 or the big Aero package, so it's got the color-matched front lip spoiler. The exhaust sounds a little bit different than normal Z06s, and the clear observation is that the exhausts are to the outer sides. This very well could be an early test car that had the camo wrap pulled off. Now there's some unsubstantiated speculation that maybe this is a Eurospec car, and so because they have more restrictive exhaust regulations, they're using the outside exhaust. Now I don't see any reason to assume that. We haven't had any other confirmations that that's going to be the case, or that Eurospec cars wouldn't have the center exhaust, so I think that's pretty unfounded, but I wanted to mention it. Next, there are some interesting photos that floated around online taken from one of the recent car shows. A Z07 packaged car, someone was able to get right down underneath it and take some photos of the underbody aero on the car. You can pretty clearly see that there are these aerodynamic strips that go underneath the car. Now you can't quite tell from the photos, but there's 4 of those per side, and they start in the center of the car, just off center on both sides, and then they curve and come out under the driver and passenger side doors, several feet in front of the rear wheels. Now these evacuate air from under the car and pull it out to the sides, helping increase downforce by sucking the car to the ground. The faster you go, the more pronounced that effect. Now I made 2 observations about this, and I think they're pretty interesting. The first is that you'll notice that these are made of plastic. You'll see that even though these are show cars, they're pretty dinged up, scratched, chips, that kind of thing, and I think that's a really good choice versus carbon fiber or some more expensive material. These are going to see some wear, they're going to see some abuse, and potentially you may have to replace them every so often if you drive your car really hard. This means they likely won't be very expensive to replace, and I think it's good keeping some of that more exotic stuff out of harm's way. Now the other observation I had was that these are pushing air out in front of the rear wheels, and one of the things that that's going to do is that's going to actually create a bit of an air curtain in front of the rear tires. Certainly it's not going to be a dramatic effect, but it's enough that it's probably going to decrease drag and actually decrease lift. Seeing as that those tires are very, very wide, at high speeds that's actually something that's probably going to contribute to the overall downforce of the car, which I think is pretty cool. Now by now, probably a lot of you have seen some footage of a caravan of Z06s out on a highway in Arizona headed the opposite direction of the camera. It's a blink and you'll miss it kind of moment. The video is only about 10 seconds long. They're filming into the sunlight, so you can't really see it very well, and the cars are zipping by. You only see them for about a second per car. Now you're probably thinking, well Fred, why are you telling us about it if you're not going to show me? And instead I've got a better option. Like most car enthusiasts, that team of Corvettes had to stop somewhere and get some good food while they were driving. Another video clip came out by somebody else of all those cars parked at a restaurant in Arizona, and there's a much better view of the cars, so that's what I want to talk about. It looks like it's about 9 or 10 Z06s in varying trim levels, all parked together, a single C8 Stingray, which is probably there for comparison purposes, and then most interesting, a Porsche 911 GT2 RS, which you may remember from an earlier video was one of the cars that Chevy early on was benchmarking the C8 Z06 against. Also in the footage, you can clearly see Corvette marketing manager Harlan Charles and a bunch of other engineers walking around and inspecting the cars. Now it's really nice to see a bunch of cars, most of which are uncamoed, all together in the same lighting, so you can get a sense of comparison between the colors. There's also some great sound of the cars as well as some revving, and it gives you a better sense of what these cars look like in the real world. There's a little bit of something for everybody here. There's coupes, there's hardtop convertibles, there's the Z07 package as well as the standard cars, there's cars with the alloy wheels, both in black as well as in silver, and then the 5-spoke carbons, as well as some of the camoed cars and a bunch of the actual release colors. Now as I alluded to before, what I think is actually the most interesting part of this video in general is that they still have that 911 GT2 RS as a benchmark for these cars. Easily one of the fastest and most track-capable production cars that Porsche has ever made. Having the Z06 directly next to it in comparison shows how serious Chevy is about the performance of this car. I think if they even come in the ballpark or the neighborhood of the performance that the GT2 RS offers, the car is going to knock everybody's socks off and be absolutely incredible. I think this is going to be one of those cars that everyone who ever gets an experience either in the car, owning one, or getting a chance to drive it is literally going to be blown away. way. I'm so excited about that. I'll include a link to both videos in the description below, but if you can only watch one, I really recommend the second one. It's way, way better than the first one. Somewhat recently, I did a video about MacMulkin and the reservation process, as well as that they were still charging just MSRP for the C8 Z06. That's still the case. You can still get on the list, but I wanted to cover a little bit of a milestone. They just recently crossed 2,000 reservations on their list. But consider the fact that when I reserved the car, they were very upfront that they expected up to 50% of the people who have reservations to drop off at some point before they actually have to pay for the car. Now, my guess is that we're going to see a pretty significant drop off of people once pricing is released for the car, as they realize that the way that they want the car spec'd actually is pretty significant money. While a base model 1LZ is probably going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $90,000, adding on a couple options, whether it's carbon wheels, Z07 package, some of the Aero, very quickly you're going to get into a car that is probably in the upper $110,000 or $120,000 range. That's a pretty significant difference for a lot of people. So if you're interested, go check out that video. The process is still the same, and as of when I'm filming this, MacMulkin is still taking reservations. Now, speaking of MacMulkin, as promised in my video 2 weeks ago with the exclusive that MacMulkin was going to be doing the C8 Z06 dealer tour on February 19th, I actually now have the timing, so I wanted to share that with you. So the dealer tour is going to take place on Saturday, February 19th, and they're going to run it from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. They've put out some advertisements, as well as it's on Facebook as an event that you can click on and add to your calendar. It should be a pretty awesome time. I'm really excited to see the car up close. I'll definitely be there, so if you show up and see me floating around, please feel free to come over and say hi. I'd like to close with what I consider to be the most interesting piece of information out of this entire video. Interesting not for what actually happened, but rather for Chevy's approach towards the image of Corvette. So YouTuber Stradman took delivery of a Torch Red C8 Z06 with a Z07 package for a couple of hours. It was a Chevy press car, and while he was allowed to start it, sit in it, rev the engine, he wasn't allowed to drive it. As you can see in the video, which I'll link in the description, Chevy had their handlers pretty close watching the entire time that he had the car. Now for Stradman, whose real name is James, the thing that struck him the most about the car was both the width of the car as well as the performance. Parked among multiple Lamborghinis, a Ferrari, and other exotic cars, the C8 Z06 really looked the part. It was really interesting to see the dimensions of the car in comparison to some things that are a lot more exotic, and it gives you a better perspective of the overall size and shape of the car. He made a really good observation about the performance for the price of the Z06 versus all the other cars in his collection, and in fact only the $1 million plus Bugatti Veyron that he has is faster 0 to 60. Everything else there, the C8 Z06 is going to be faster than, which I think is pretty amazing considering the company that it was with. Now that's not what's interesting. Now the most interesting thing here is what this exposition says about Chevy's branding and marketing for the car. Chevy is working hard to increase interest among younger car buyers, and their approach of courting really big YouTubers with huge audiences and getting the Z06 in front of their eyes is pretty interesting. You may remember from the unveiling video that Emelia Hartford featured pretty prominently in that. She's a car YouTuber with over 800,000 followers, and she does a lot of pretty interesting things. She works on her own cars, she takes them to the track, and owns what still may be the fastest C8 Stingray for the drag strip that's been made. It's a twin-turbo C8, and it's crazy. And Stradman, for his part, he's even bigger. He's got 3.6 million subscribers. The fact that Chevy brought a Z06 directly to James' house, not a venue or a public space, but actually his house, so it could be featured prominently on his channel, speaks volumes about Chevy's commitment to drawing new, younger customers. Now, while they're focused on younger customers, Chevy hasn't forgotten their core audience, still marketing the car as being able to carry 2 golf bags. So I think everybody can coexist. The biggest challenge may actually be finding younger buyers who have the money to actually buy these cars. Now, I think it'll be interesting to see a broadening of Corvette's customer base, and I think it's great to try to draw in fans of the car who may become lifelong Corvette customers, like myself. I hope you found this interesting, and if you did, please consider subscribing. I'm going to be doing a lot of Corvette C8 Z06 content, a mix of the news as well as observations and analysis. So anyway, thank you for watching, and until next time, Fred out! Hi, there is some cool stuff.